So we've got a variety of topics. We're going to have public comment up front. Susanna emailed out a number of public comments we've received to date, primarily relating to the housing code issues that Pauline Hardy will walk through. And so today we're really talking about two big issues that always gets the interest of this community. We're talking about housing and parking. And so with related to housing on the road to 3,000, we've been amending the development code routinely to allow for a wider variety of housing types in line with both House Bill 2001. We'll talk about House Bill 3450 today. And I think, you know, the council and the community has really demonstrated a real interest in amending our codes and streamlining processes to allow for that greater variety of housing. And this is just one more step in that process. So it's definitely a marathon versus a sprint, but we wanted to give you some background as Pauline and the planning team have the first round of planning commission hearings here coming up pretty soon. And then it would be in front of council as well. Following that, after Pauline provides her presentation and answers questions, we have Toby Marks, who will walk through the Old Bend Neighborhood Parking Benefit District. And so this is an opportunity for him to explain it, ask specific details. Obviously with parking, there's never a super simple answer, but I'm really impressed with the work that he's done with the members of the Old Bend Neighborhood Association to come up with a pilot project. And if you've been down in certain areas of that neighborhood, like near Miller's Landing Park and all that, there's definitely some challenges that need to be addressed. So with that, Susanna, do you mind if I hand it off to you to walk through the public comments? And then I don't know if we have anybody on the line for public comment, but Juan wanted to see what we had in that department.
We do not have anybody at this point, John, waiting for public comment.
Thank you, Juan. So Susanna, you want to summarize the, just give a brief overview of the comments you forwarded on a few minutes ago?
Sure, and I have to say I'm sorry these came in so late. It's been a while since we convened the subcommittee, and we'll be a little more organized next time. So I received one from Dave Johnson, who's the NLA chair, and that was the first one I sent to you all, just came in a little bit ago. And the NLA is generally supportive of the code changes, with the exception of the micro units, and it sounds like they're working on a paper and would like to submit that at some point. So that one, let's see. And then Pauline had a few come in over the weekend, generally supportive. I haven't had a chance to read these in detail, to be honest, because they just came in. So, but just generally in favor. Let's see, one from Denise Labuda from Council on Aging, one from Catherine Only in support for the small and micro unit housing. Let's see. And Pauline is sending me them as we speak. So they're generally in support. Let's see. Go ahead.
I just got a message from somebody saying they are trying to call into the line and not able to. It just keeps disconnecting. So, sorry to interrupt, Susanna.
No, that's good.
No, that's okay.
Juan, any ideas on what's going on?
The line is open, and I'm actually dialed into it from another phone just to make sure that it's working. So I'm not sure. We do have a user who called into the main meeting, and if you don't mind me, I'm happy to ask and see if they are here maybe to provide public comment and accidentally dialed the wrong phone number. All right. I have a calling user with area code 206 and the first three digits of your phone number 419. I'm going to unmute your phone and you're going to hear two beeps. Can you let us know if you're here for public comment or just to listen in to the meeting, please?
Hello, this is Lisa Mushel. I'm Vice Chair of the Neighborhood Leadership Alliance and Chair of Century West Neighborhood Association. I did submit my comments, although I submitted them just prior to 3 o'clock. I just want to let you know I serve on the NLA's Land Use Working Group along with Dave Johnson, and we also offer a letter of conditional support. I want you to be aware of the public survey that we were able to send out over the last couple of weeks, and we were very pleased to get some decent turnout for that survey. While 284 responses does not seem like a lot, we managed to do that within a relatively short amount of time. We would be pleased to extend the survey response period should this committee or the council or planning commission wish us to do so, and provide new input following the completion of that survey. The Neighborhood Leadership Alliance, the neighborhood associations are all committed to promoting dialogue between the neighborhood associations and the council to better understand engaged citizen opinions, and the NLA plans to continue to use these survey tools as a way to deliver public opinion results to the council and other subcommittees in the future. So thank you for your time, and I hope that you read the letter and the attached references that we have put in the letter. We have some very grave concerns about equity, about diversity, and the appropriateness of these microunits in the city of Bend. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Juan, do we have anybody else in line to provide testimony?
Yes, thank you, John. Yes, we have one more caller. I have caller with area code 971, prefix 266. I'm going to unmute your phone, and if you can, if you hear 2 beeps, please proceed with your comment.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Okay, great. This is Melanie Keebler. I was trying to call in on the public comment line that's listed on the agenda. It just disconnects. I just want folks to know that. So I went and then called into the listen only number. So I wanted to give comment in support of the code changes and in support of the micro units as part of those changes. I think it's a good thing to diversify the types of housing we have here. And I think especially the micro units, they're not for everyone, but they are for some people, that they will be affordable and more accessible types of housing that can work for certain people that need that type of housing. So I encourage the city to move forward with that. I also want to comment, I don't think there should be a parking minimum specifically for the micro housing. I think that creates a financial barrier that can be a bar to development. And I'm hoping that these are going to be going in places where we're having a more walkable, accessible city by other means than car. And again, I don't want to put up unnecessary barriers to that kind of development. So that's my comment. And yeah, I don't know what's going on with the other line, but it didn't even ring. So hopefully there's nobody else that wanted to call in that can't, but maybe you could put out the other number and ask them to call this one if you want more people to comment. Thanks.
Juan, do you think there's any ideas what was going on with Melanie's particular issue?
No, not sure. I will need to go and check on the agenda again. Like I said, John, I'm dialed into that other line right now, and I have it open, and the only phone number I see is mine. But I'm happy to update something in our YouTube live stream if you want to allow for comments at the end of the meeting, or.
I'll look to the council.
Oh, go ahead.
I said I'll look to the councilors to see if they would like to reserve time at the end if we want to allow more public comment. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I'm fine with that as well. So I see on the agenda, it's 1-855-282-6330. And then on our calendar, it says 185. Let's see. Oh, so, okay, that's the difference between the listen only and the public comment. 828 versus 282.
Okay.
But I don't know.
Is
Maybe
it,
we can ask Melanie which number she called and was able to get through on.
they should both. Oops. Oh, I'm sorry. I got the 2 meetings. Let me make sure I'm unmuted. I am unmuted. Sorry. It should be one. They should be the same. Both phone numbers should be the same. It's the meeting access code that should be different.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it looks like the public on the agenda was published with the wrong phone number.
I think it just got reversed. It's 828 rather than 282.
Gotcha. Okay, let's make a note of that and make sure we get that corrected for our next meeting. Moving
Thanks.
on, unless there's anybody else, I think we have the approval of them. Oh, look at that. Kathy.
I didn't know if we were going to be called on to give comment from the Affordable Housing Committee or not, and I didn't know if this was the appropriate time to weigh in and say that our committee is in support of these changes. So I thought I'd wave my hand right now. Wasn't sure what the format was going to be. So our committee is very much in support of all the changes that are proposed, and particularly the micro units that we're going to be discussing today. And just want to let everyone know that these have been very thoroughly vetted. I've been part of the stakeholders group that worked on these with Pauline, and there was a lot of good input. And I think that what Pauline is going to be presenting to you today is an excellent document and deserves support. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you. Any other members of the committees? I know Scott's on here. I'm looking through the names. Anybody else have any other comments before we dive into the meat of the meeting? Okay, that's it.
Yeah. Sorry, this is Scott with the Planning Commission. Yeah, we had a working session on it, and it seemed fairly positive. I don't think anyone from the Planning Commission had any strong objections to anything that any of these development code updates. So we still have our public meeting next Monday. So yeah, I think it looks like the Planning Commission will probably be recommending this to the City Council.
Great, thank you, Scott. Okay. And Susanna will send out a few more emailed comments that are generally in support. So with that, why don't we try to move on to approval of the meeting minutes from February?
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Perfect. How about a vote?
Aye.
Aye.
So with that out of the way, I see Pauline Hardy has her video on. She is going to walk through some of the proposed code changes that address both House Bill 2001 as well as House Bill 3450. I see Russ is on here, Russ Grayson, for support as well. But Pauline, why don't you take it away? And I believe you have a slideshow for the group.
I do. Thank you, John. And I think we'll just do what we did during the Planning Commission work session. That was helpful. So I'm going to go through, I understand I have about 15 minutes, so I'm going to go through this kind of fast. If you want to ask questions during it, that's fine. Or I can answer the questions afterwards, whichever works best for you. So we'll start with House Bill 2001. This one was passed in 2019, and it has two main requirements. And one we start addressing with this package of updates, and the next set of requirements we'll start addressing, which is what I'm calling phase 2 of the code updates for 2001. So the first requirement is that we have to allow, according to House Bill 2001, duplexes on each lot or parcel zoned for residential uses. So basically, if you allow a single family home, you have to allow a duplex, and you pretty much have to treat them the same. And then the second part of House Bill 2001 is to allow triplexes, quadplexes, cottage clusters, and townhomes. But instead of the bill reading on each lot for residential use, it says in areas zoned for residential use. And I'm part of a technical advisory committee with the state that is working on the model code for House Bill 2001 that cities will have the option to use, or they can create their own code, which is what we would end up doing. But working with the technical advisory committee, and then Lynn McConnell's on the rulemaking advisory committee, and we have our next meeting tomorrow and last meeting, we should know more what's going to be required for the triplexes, quadplexes, cottage clusters, and townhomes. So I kind of set that aside, but some of the amendments you'll see in this package do address duplexes. Next slide, please. And then on top of the requirements for House Bill 2001, we all know we have the council goal permitting 3,000 units by June of 2021. We have a couple strategies that the council has, including increasing the supply of shovel-ready residential land and to audit the Bend Development Code. And then the second strategy is to explore alternative housing types with the strategy to adopt policies for alternative housing models such as fourplexes, tiny homes, and single room occupancies. So when we speak of tiny homes in this proposed code update, we're calling them small dwelling unit developments. And then the single room occupancies, the group that I worked with, we decided to call them micro units. Next, please. Public outreach in November, worked with the Planning Commission in its role as a citizen involvement committee and approved a stakeholder group. We had several representatives, including members from City Council, Planning Commission, Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, Neighborhood Leadership Alliance, and others, COVA, Central Oregon Land Watch, and developers. There was also people from the public that attended, including 1,000 friends. We did, and we're fortunate to hold 3 meetings together. And then we had a 4th meeting scheduled, but obviously it had to be canceled because of COVID. So instead of meeting, I sent out the draft that the committee or stakeholder group have been working on for micro units and small dwelling units, just to get the stakeholder group's feedback since we couldn't meet in person. And then I received their feedback, put together a larger package of amendments and mailed that or emailed that out in June. And that went back to the stakeholder advisory group and also went to the Bend Development Code update group, which is that large email list that I have of attorneys, developers, planners, citizens, and then anybody else that has expressed an interest in the amendments received the draft. And that was just to get some high level feedback from these people to make sure I'm not missing anything, that it's consistent. And I received a number of comments. And then in July 31st, I did mail the notice to the neighborhood association so that they're aware of the update as well as required by our Bend Development Code. Next, please. So the package is large, includes new definitions. It does propose duplexes to be permitted outright in our low density residential district as required by the House bill. And then it reduces the lot sizes in the RL and standard density residential districts. We do have some clarifications in there and some minor changes to some review procedures for master plans. The main one is creating a new chapter called 3.8 and we're calling it development alternatives. In the code today, we have a whole bunch of different ones. We have mid-block developments, flag lots, T courts, shared courts, cottage housing, and courtyard housing. They're scattered throughout the development code. So if someone's really looking to see what they can do, they would have a hard time finding them. So this, the intent is to just get it all in one location so a developer can just go straight to 3.8 and see the alternatives. And then this is where we're proposing that the micro unit developments, small dwelling unit developments, and zero lot line developments would reside. Next, please. Okay, so we're just going to jump right into micro unit developments. Micro unit development is a very small unit. It typically consists of one living room space, and that space usually includes like your seating area, your bedroom, a bathroom, storage, and what we're calling a food preparation area instead of a kitchen. We are proposing to allow them in all the residential districts, as well as in the mixed-use urban district and the mixed-use neighborhood district, and working with the Planning Commission also in the Bend Central District or part of a mixed-use development. The density would be calculated differently because they're so small, and similar to how we started looking at cottages in the cottage housing code. 4 micro units would equal 1 dwelling unit. And then the lot sizes are shown here, 10,000 for the first 4 units. And then as each additional unit gets added on, it increases the size of the lot depending on the zone that it's in. Next, please. So these are 2 examples of what a potential micro unit may look like. The minimum floor area would be 150 square feet, and then the maximum floor area would be 400 square feet. There is an exception that if a developer does accessible units, then they can increase it to 450 square feet. So the top picture is a living space of 225 square feet. And you can see it includes a bathroom, includes one sink. This particular one includes a little food prep area and a closet. And then the one that's below it is 319 square feet. And it includes a full bathroom with its own sink and some cabinets and a food preparation area. The requirements for the micro units for Bend would be a small food preparation area, which means it must include an under-the-counter refrigerator, a dedicated outlet, like if you wanted to have like a toaster oven or something, and then a contiguous worktop area or countertop area of no less than 4 square feet. So it doesn't have to be big, but just enough where you have a little bit of area to do some food prep if you chose to. One sink is required. So it can either be in the bathroom or it could be, you know, like your hotel room where it's not in the bathroom, it's more with your food prep area. And then each unit does have to have its own private bathroom and shower bathtub facility. Next, please. Because they have such small living space and food preparation areas, the proposed micro unit developments would be required to have a common kitchen. So basically for every 10, you have to have one common kitchen. And then we define what a kitchen is, and it's basically the definition out of the development code. So refrigerator, stove, range top, oven, and just to put a size square footage on it, minimum would be 120 square feet per common kitchen. And then the developer would have the option of providing either private space, common space, or even a combination of whatever they choose. And so private space could be like private balconies or patios, and then a common space could be a living room. It could be courtyards, rooftop decks, dining rooms to go with the kitchen. And then there's some square footages that would be required for each one of the private and or common open spaces. Next, please. Similar to our other types of developments, we do have 2 standards. One is to reduce the prominence of the garage. And I don't know how often you will see garages with these, but if you do have a garage, it would be set back a little bit. And then only one front door of the development would have to face the street, not each unit, but just one. So imagine like what would look like an apartment complex, one main entrance would face the street. And then the parking requirements are reduced compared to our regular parking requirements. And again, it's based on them being such small units. In the low density residential, it's proposed to be 1 parking space. And then in the other residential districts, it would be a half a parking space. And that's also in the mixed use and commercial districts would be a half a parking space. And one discussion that we have with the Planning Commission is because these are geared towards providing alternative housing is to prohibit them as being short-term rentals. And what we were proposing was just to prohibit them to be short-term rentals in the residential districts. However, after hearing some feedback from some of the committee members and Planning Commission, it was determined that regardless of what zone they're going to be located in, so even if it's in like the Bend Central District or the mixed use districts, they would be prohibited as a short-term rental. Next, please. So these are 2 examples. This is a conceptual drawing by Ross Chapman of just a smaller micro unit development. So I can picture something like this in our standard density residential zones where you have this type of structure. It's a single story. It provides 4 micro unit developments. Each of the little micro units are 320 square feet. And then in the center there, you can see kind of a, I guess you'd call that pink color. That is where they have their common kitchen, and they provide a living room and dining room in there as well. And then, you know, if these are located in your standard density or whatever residential zoning district, they still have to meet the required setbacks and the height requirements so that they would still look and feel like a single family dwelling unit. And then the next slide, please. This one's on a larger scale of a micro unit development, probably something you may see in the Bend Central District, perhaps. It includes 55 micro units. And in this development, there are 2 common kitchens per floor. And I forget how big the units are. Oh, 150 square feet. So they're right at our bare minimum for the sizes. And then on the top floor, each unit also has a loft. Next, please. So I don't know if now's a good time if you want to ask questions about the micro unit developments, or if you want to keep going through the small dwelling unit developments in the 0 lot line.
Pauline, I was going to suggest that perhaps we talk about the micro units while it's fresh on our mind, if members of the council want to do that. Are there any questions for Pauline?
I guess if you could go back, Pauline, thanks for that presentation. Interesting, and it's fun to see the image of it too. So I know there have been some of these larger, denser communities. What have been the pros and cons people have begun to implement these and build these in our communities?
So the pros and cons from them being developed in other communities.
I mean, I guess I sort of, are there any disadvantages or changes that we need to know about from other communities?
You know, some areas treat them completely different. That's why, I mean, if you look them up, everyone's got a little bit different idea. So we're calling them micro unit developments. A lot of cities do. Some call them efficiency units, some call them single room occupancies. And then each city has kind of a different code. So if you go to California, perhaps, you definitely see single room occupancies where they're more geared towards transitional housing, and they have a management on site. We're not proposing management because we're seeing these more as an opportunity for people who want to live in them that maybe perhaps just graduated college and they're just done with having roommates, but they can afford this unit and have their own space without roommates. And the residents too, from a lot of the articles I've read, they don't spend a lot of time in these units. A lot of times they are out to dinner with friends or, you know, out doing stuff. So that's why they're okay living small. These are not going to be for everybody, that's for sure. So I don't see the negative consequences. I know I've read a couple letters proposing that there should be on-site management. I don't know that that's necessary or not.
Hi, this is Dave Johnson. Can I speak on the micro units?
Yes. Hi, Dave.
Hi. Susanna summarized my comments earlier. We are the NLA land use subgroup that have been working on this, and we've done a really deep dive into micro units, their history, and what's going on now. And we have some real concerns about how far the micro unit development should go before we have some history of our own. And like Susanna said earlier, we have been doing a position paper for the last 2 weeks, and we will be sending it to all of the counselors and all of the planning committee members, and we would seriously like for you all to look at what we think we've learned and the citations that we send along with this message. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
I have some questions. This is all bundled up under the kind of the headline of House Bill 2001, but 2001 doesn't actually force this, does it? I mean, we're doing this kind of as a larger, broader package for HB 2001. This is just an add-in, is that right? Or does it actually require?
No, this was just trying to implement council's goals of one of your strategies was to adopt policies for single room occupancies. So these are single room occupancies. We have just named them micro units.
Yeah.
So we're trying to implement council's goals. And the thought was, it was called a House Bill 2001 package. And I was hoping the state was going to move faster with their proposed changes that cities would be required to do. So the stakeholder group kind of put a little pause on that so we could see what the state's going to require. And in the meantime, we started working on the council goals of single micro units and this tiny homes, or what we're calling the small dwelling unit lot developments.
Okay. Yeah. So I just wanted, I think that's an important delineation, that this isn't, because we kind of moved in from duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, kind of right into this. But there is a delineation that this was something separate from that effort. You know, in theory, I agree that, you know, short-term rentals probably aren't desirable in this kind of aspect, particularly in the residential neighborhood, because you essentially end up with a de facto hotel operating like a hotel. But if you have, you know, I guess I'm a little more open in the other zones. But if there's other ways, so because to me this almost, it doesn't quite get there, but it's almost kind of like a hostel type thing. You know, and so is there a way for somebody to have more of a communal type living as a hotel, if they so chose to do that? Is there a way in the code to get there, or would this be an avenue that somebody might want to go that route with that, if they were trying to put together kind of a more communal type short-term rental or hotel type situation?
There's definitely a way to get there if it's not zoned residential through your mixed use zones or commercial zones. But in your residential, I mean, either you can do a short-term rental out of the house. I'm not 100% familiar with all the requirements of short-term rentals, to be quite honest, of how it's regulated, if you're allowed to set it up as a, I don't think you can rent out each bedroom, but again, Justin, I apologize. I'm not 100% familiar with how we regulate short-term rentals out of a house.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah. And yeah, so I agree with the short-term rental. Some people might be a little surprised at that, but I think that makes sense for this situation. And then the parking, can you talk to me how you ended up, or how did we land on a half? Because in the RL, looks like, I'm trying to find back to that other slide. It looks like you had a full, you know, one parking space per unit, and then in all the other zones, it was a half space per unit. How did we determine that?
So the RL, because they're larger lots and more, you know, rural type housing, the stakeholder group supported the one. They were interested in the half to mirror what we did in the Bend Central District. And because the size of the units are so small, they just wanted to start at the half. Doesn't mean a developer couldn't put in more parking, of course, but they were interested in less parking because of the size of the units.
Okay. But there's there data to support, I mean, well, I guess my question is there data to support that there's less actual vehicles for these tenants that would rent something like this versus a studio apartment? I think we should be driving this on data. And so is there other information from other jurisdictions that these units actually they do produce people that have less vehicles?
So the data, these are the articles that I have read, is typically when these are built, we can't guarantee it, but they're usually built in a location that is closer to the downtown or closer to restaurants or your amenities and jobs. So you could have less parking because the idea is they're going to be located where you could live and not necessarily own a car. But we're not requiring that. You know, we're not saying you have to be a half a mile from transit or, you know, within walking distance to the grocery store. But the thought is that if a developer were to build them, usually they're going to be located somewhere where you can bike or ride to your amenities.
Hi, this is Dave again. Our research also leads to the same conclusion that Pauline's did. We have found that the micro units that thrive are the ones that are in mixed use, with lots of transportation, with lots of dining, shopping, and working places. And our bottom line recommendation is that Bend should not jump into the micro unit until we've tried it out and have some kind of experience with how it works. So our bottom line recommendation is that we include the micro units, because we are not disagreeing that they are part of the missing middle housing. We're just saying that they need to be put into an area where transportation, shopping, dining, and working is all within walking distance, or has sufficient transportation support to allow a single or a couple to have one of these units and not be totally dependent on transit or anything like that that is a barrier.
So we have Dave, you're representing NLA, is that correct?
That is correct. I am a member of the land use subgroup and co-chairman along with of course.
Okay.
Anyway.
And we have so I think we have the basic recommendation from NLA. So thank you for fleshing that out a little bit more. I think.
Okay, we will be sending our paper, which also is referenced to all of the counselors and all of the planning commission.
I would hope that you would. Yes, I would hope you would provide that to the planning commission.
Oh, it'll be out tomorrow or the next day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks, Dave. So are we looking to provide direction, or are we just getting questions at this point?
From my perspective, it's more of a discussion and information. Since we can ask questions since it's going on to the planning commission before it comes to council. So this is just the subcommittee discussion.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, for my purposes, I tend to lean towards where Dave and the NLA are going. Is I think we do need to test these out. We need to see how they behave in our community, and so I would actually like to see some sort of a pilot project to and maybe either limit it to a specific zone or a certain area to an opportunity area that was part of the UGB, something like that. But if we're going to go wide to all the residential areas, I think the parking for the residential areas on these units is inadequate, and and so I think instead of being so broad to cover parking, based, for all zones, I think we probably should split that up. If we're going to go all zones initially with this, then I think we should look at parking differently per zone.
Excuse me, the land use subgroup has landed on the redevelopment of the Bend core district, and we think that should be like a trial period to allow the micro units, so that we can see if we locate them where they are fully serviced by job opportunities, transportation, dining, and shopping, that we could find out whether or not they are economically viable in that kind of environment before we try to loosen it up to other mixed unit developments. We are more than I think solid on the fact that the residential zones, especially with the transit system that we have, are probably not desirable.
Thank you. I'd like to hear from Kathy in the Affordable Housing Committee. I think you're going to have to unmute, Kathy. There you go.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to bring up a couple of items. I don't necessarily disagree with some of the comments. However, I just would like to comment on affordability. We're trying to create units where a car is unnecessary because the cost of owning and maintaining an insurance and maintaining a car is so significant. What we're really looking for is an opportunity to have a kind of unit where a car wouldn't necessarily be needed. And we also think that there are going to be different modes of transportation as we move into the future in terms of shuttle service and so forth. The other aspect is we want to caution everyone to remember the Fair Housing Act. And the Bend Central Core currently is the census tract of least income in Bend. And if you were to limit the use of this particular housing type in the Central Core, you possibly are overburdening the low income area of Bend with units that are designed to be low income. So you just really need to be cognizant of that. One of the development types that Pauline showed you by architect Ross Chapin is something that could easily fit into a single family neighborhood. So it may be that we see something like that first, rather than something of a larger scale that she showed you that might go into the Central Core. But I also caution that these are extremely expensive units to build because of all of the kitchens and bathrooms, and it may not be financially feasible to do at all. And so the more you restrict it and the more parking you require, the less likely it's going to happen at all. So finding that sweet spot where you're addressing the concerns, but also meeting the letter of the law of the Fair Housing Act is up to you, but I just bring those two items up to your attention.
Sally,
Kathy, I think those are really important points for us to keep in mind. And obviously this will come before council, so we'll have a lot more time to consider that. But I just want to echo what Kathy was saying about the parking minimums and the expense of building on-site parking for a developer that's going to be trying to make this pencil, and especially given that I think we see this as an important affordable housing option for workers in the community. One example that just came to mind for me of someplace this might work is out by St. Charles. But we would want, for workers at the hospital, but we would want to give developers the flexibility to locate one of these developments any place where they think that it makes the most sense. So, I think it makes sense to allow it in all areas and to see what comes up. I think I don't think we're going to see a huge number of these developed immediately. So also I think the parking. I personally would go the other direction toward no parking requirements and just let developers, kind of decide what makes the most sense given the location that they've chosen and other constraints of the lot and the cost. But, if you think about a single family home being rented to several people living as roommates, one of these would function in much the same way, but the parking requirements would be much less. So that's just another way to think about it.
Sally, you're on mute if you were going to address the group.
Should we hear the rest of this presentation and see if there's any more discussion after that? That work?
The way I looked at it is that these micro units were probably going to generate the most questions. So I think it was good that we stopped there. And why don't we move on to the rest of Pauline's presentation, unless there's anything else that anybody wants to offer.
Okay. Well, I'm going to move then to the small dwelling unit developments. Again, we worked with our, can we go back one slide? Well, can you go back one slide, please? Oh, you go way back, right? Like 5 slides. Okay, there. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, I think we got it. So these are our attempt for tiny homes or small dwelling unit developments, stick-built structures. The permitted uses would be for single-family detached dwellings. Of course, we would have to allow an accessory dwelling unit and a duplex on these lots because of particularly the duplexes with House Bill 2001. The zoning districts would be limited to just basically our standard density residential and medium density residential, not the high density because we don't allow single family detached structures in there. And the density we would look at calculating different again. So it would be based on size. And I'll get into the size maximums in a moment. But for density purposes, if the units are 600 square feet or smaller, it would be considered a quarter of a dwelling unit. And then if the units are between 601 and 800 square feet, then it would be considered a half a dwelling unit. The lot sizes would be reduced, and that's why we're going to put some size maximums on the dwelling units themselves. So in our standard density residential district, the lot size for a single family detached structure is 4,000 square feet today, and this would allow them to go down to 1,500 square feet. And likewise, in the medium density residential lot size today is 2,500 square feet, and they'd be allowed to go down to 1,500 square feet. The developer would have an option if they want to go by this because there's some flexibility, or if they just want to develop a duplex in the medium density residential under just standard development code standards, and that just provides them some flexibility. The lot width would be 20 feet, pretty narrow, and if you're on a corner, it would be 25 feet. Next slide, please. So the maximum floor area of these would be 800 square feet for, let's say, a primary dwelling unit on the lot. And then your ADU, or accessory dwelling unit, cannot exceed 600 square feet. But we don't want to see too much square footage on these lots when you do like a house and an ADU or a duplex. So the total combined square footage of the two units would be 1,200 square feet. So for example, you could do a 800 square foot primary dwelling unit and then a 400 square foot ADU for a total of 1,200 square feet. Or let's say you want to do a duplex, you could possibly do, if you chose, 2 600 square foot units, but no more than 1,200 square feet. And there is some square footage allowed separate for garages. The setbacks would be a little bit different. So today, our setbacks for standard density and medium density residential is 5 feet for side and rear. The proposal on these, because they're such small lots, would propose the side yard setback at 3 feet instead of 5. And then in the rear, you could do 3 feet if the structures don't exceed 25 feet in height. And then the only standard, and we actually added some extra flexibility, is to help reduce the prominence of the garage. So this picture on the right by Jesse Russell shows how there is no front door on the front, but there is a large balcony on the second floor. So that just kind of helps reduce the prominence of the garage. And this would be a good example of what a small dwelling unit development could look like due to the size of the structures. And then the parking requirements for these would be 1 per dwelling unit. And of course, the accessory dwelling unit doesn't require any parking because of state law. Next, please. So that's the gist of the small dwelling unit developments. I didn't know if you want to add, if you have any questions for those, I can answer that, or I can just briefly go over the 0 lot line developments and then answer any questions. Hearing none.
I'm fine with combining them together. I have questions, but we can combine both together.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, this won't take too long. So 0 lot line developments, many codes have this. We don't have it in Bend. And working with the stakeholder group, they thought it would be a good idea, since we're putting in development alternatives, just to get this into the Bend development code. Basically allows a developer, when they own a number of lots, to situate a house on the lot line on one side, and then on the other side, that would be a 10-foot side yard setback. So instead of having 2 5-foot side yard setbacks, this would put the house on the 0 lot line and then provide a much larger usable yard of 10 feet versus 5. Again, it'd just be permitted in our standard density and medium density residential districts. There's some privacy standards and building code requirements, because if you put the structure on the building lot, on the property line, no openings would be allowed. And then there'd be a 5-foot easement adjacent to that 0 lot line, so that you can still maintain the side of the house that is on the 0 lot line. And the next slide, please. There's a picture of what this looks like. Next slide, please. There we go. Kind of a rough concept, but you can see the two structures in the middle. They are situated on the 0 lot line, and then that hashed area is the 5-foot easement that is required. And then you can see that each of those have a 10-foot setback. Again, instead of 2 5-foot side yards, you have a nice usable yard at 10 feet. And that is it for the 0 lot line development. So I can answer questions about this one and then the small dwelling unit developments.
Yeah, thanks, Pauline. I think that gives some good information. In that, I appreciate the visual. Being a more visual person, that helps me out. Because my experience with 0 lot lines are more that they behave more similarly to townhomes, and so I haven't. So you're still, in this case, or in this scenario, you would still maintain the separation that has really been deemed needed for fire. I mean, just a few days ago, we had, a fire at a home that spread to other homes. And I think that's, really the reasoning behind setbacks. And so you're still maintaining that total setback of 10 feet. Is that right?
That's correct on these. Now, if, and I don't know that we'd actually see it, but if we, let's say, approve the small dwelling unit developments instead of 10, and someone wanted to do the small 1,500 square foot lots, they would have a distance of 6, which still meets building code.
Okay. And I guess that kind of leads into my other question on more of the small building, or small dwelling units.
Mm-hmm.
Has fire had input on this? I have a concern going to a 3-foot setback.
I believe I have an email. I'll find it and provide it to everybody. And then I've been working very closely with the building department on these as well. They were also sitting in on all the stakeholder meetings, the building department. And
Okay.
I'm pretty sure it was a while ago, but if my memory serves me correctly, I worked with Larry with the fire department, and he said as long as it meets building code, they're fine with it. But I can share that email.
Okay, that would be great. And the other question I have, because on those, so your density calculations are 600 square feet or less, or a quarter unit, or a quarter of a dwelling. Do you see this as a lead in to ultimately getting into SDCs that are based on square footage? Are we setting a precedent? And because to me, that's a separate conversation that needs to be had, and we need to vet that fully. But are we setting a precedent by saying, hey, we are going to call these things quarter units, and then do we end up leading to, well, now you must do SDCs based on the same kind of thing because you've already said they're a quarter unit. Just Googling real quick, the average square footage of a studio apartment, because apartment developers probably go, hey, I want the same deal, so I've got less. So the average square footage of a studio apartment, from what I could find, is like 514 square feet. So it's less than 600 feet. So I just want to be careful that we're not setting a precedent that now we must change our SDC methodology to match what this density is. And has there been discussions or any thought to that?
So we're mirroring what we just did for the cottage housing development. So we've already done this once, the cottage code. And then there has been questions about SDCs, and I defer them on to the city council because my code updates are separate from system development charges. But these are still going to be single family dwelling units by definition in the Bend Development Code. Just because we're calculating density a little bit different, they're still defined as a detached dwelling unit.
Okay.
Yeah, that was my recollection of the discussion too. Thanks, Pauline. Yeah, that there was a desire to kind of make this align, more like the cottage code. And there were individuals in that group who were interested, of course, in talking about SDCs, but we were not going to go there for that discussion. So.
Yeah, I appreciate that clarification, Jen. I just, as long as we're setting clear expectations up front that this doesn't automatically lead into the next discussion or into, you know, into a decision on the next discussion, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions?
Not on these two, but Pauline, I think earlier in your presentation, you had mentioned that the RL lot size is changing.
Yes.
What's
Yep. So because of House Bill 2000, House Bill 2001 is requiring, again, duplexes to be treated like single family detached. A duplex today in the RL is on a 20,000 square foot lot with a conditional use permit. A single family detached dwelling unit is outright permitted in the RL on a 10,000 square foot lot. So the proposed amendments will take away the conditional use permit and then allow a duplex on a 10,000 square foot lot in the RL. And then in the RS, it would allow a duplex instead of a 6,000 square foot lot that's required today, it would be on a 4,000 square foot lot.
Okay, so we're not actually changing the minimum lot size in the zoning. It's just that the duplexes have to be treated like the single family. Is that right? So we're not reducing from the 10,000 square foot minimum RL that we changed, I don't know, a few years ago. It's still 10,000 feet, the minimum lot.
That's correct. Yeah, it's just a duplex instead of 20,000 will be on 10.
Okay, sorry, I didn't catch that clarification earlier. Thank you.
Tina, any more questions? All right.
So I don't know how much time I have, but I can just give a real high level overview of the House Bill 3450. I think I only had a half hour and I'm already in an hour, so I just want to check the time.
Toby's got his parking conversation. Do you think we could bust through this in 10 to 15 minutes?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, why don't we try that?
All right, perfect. And I'll go through this quite fast, but we have House Bill 3450, and it allows the city of Bend to look at areas that could allow standalone residential uses that are zoned for economic purposes, so our commercial zones and mixed use zones. There are specific criteria in the House Bill. One is whatever we do, we cannot allow more than 40 acres citywide to have this type of development in our economic development zones. These do not include any industrial zones, as you'll see when we go through this. And we have to make sure we still have a supply of employment lands within the UGB urban growth boundary. We've made the findings, DLCD's already reviewed them, so we're okay there. The process, we're gonna go through our normal process, and then afterwards we have to submit it to the state for their review and approval as well. Lastly, one of the requirements of the bill is we had to consult with the Oregon Department of Transportation on our proposed amendments, and we have done so, and we received a letter stating that they were, I think, supportive of the amendments and that we definitely met the requirement to consult with them. Next, please. And Brianne, jump in. Gail, she's been helping me with this amendment too. So the existing code today, just as a reminder, the zones, commercial limited, general commercial, and mixed employment zones allow residential uses, but they have to be part of a mixed use development. The proposed code, as allowed by House Bill 3450, removes the requirement for the ground floor to be employment uses or a type of mixed use development. Next, please. We worked with staff internally and came up with some criteria for a developer to choose a site to propose this type of development. We narrowed it down to the 3 zones of commercial limited, general commercial, and mixed employment. So as you see, there's no industrial zone properties, which VDAB was supportive of. Every property that proposes to do this must be 5 acres or less, but it doesn't mean that if they have a 10-acre parcel, they can't do it. They just have to partition, and the standalone residential would be limited to 5. We felt that allowed more opportunities for more of these developments versus one developer coming in and just consuming maybe 20 acres here and 20 acres there. The 5 acres could help us maybe get them dispersed a little bit more throughout the city. We do have a locational requirement that they'd have to be located within 1/4 mile of transit, not located in any of our opportunity areas or master plans or outside the city limits, and then located south of Empire Avenue. This Empire Avenue, really we were looking at areas that we felt were more walkable, and if we push them out by the Target Trader Joe's area, that's not really conducive to what we were looking for. So we do have a map that identifies the areas located south of Empire. Next, please. So these areas are our eligible sites. They meet all that criteria that we just listed. And you can see there's quite a bit of opportunity in these three particular zones that would allow a developer to propose this type of development. Next, please. And this is a close-up of what we meant by just south of Empire. So you could be south of Polshos Road, still on Service Road, and Halfway Road. So there's a certain area that you can be a little bit north of Empire, but the majority of the eligible properties would be south. Next. So real quick, going over the code amendments, these type of developments would have to meet our high density residential density, so at least 21.7 units to the acre. We're not concerned with the type of housing that they put on there, so we left it very flexible. They could do townhomes, duplexes, triplexes, multifamily, as long as they're able to meet that minimum of 21.7 units to the acre. The approval process would be basically going through site plan review, and we would show it on the zoning map so that people are aware that they're approved through this House Bill 3450 and are considered an urban dwelling site is what we're calling these. Duration of approval, our thought behind this, it's a little bit shorter than our normal approval processes, is that we don't want a developer to consume 5 acres and then sit on it for years. We would actually like to see these go through the application process, through the building department, and get constructed so that they provide the needed housing. The approval process then would limit it to 1 year, but we do allow an extension for 1. So basically they can have 2 years to get through the building permit process. And because affordable housing sometimes takes a little bit longer, they would get a total of 3 years to get through the building permit process. Next, please. Development standards, basically the minimum lot area of 5 acres, some setback requirements that are pretty similar to the underlying zoning district's requirements. Next, please. Design standards, these are very similar to what we just approved for the Bend Central District. So looking at some transparency requirements for the first floor, that's a little bit more than the upper floors. And then the building articulation, they have a number of treatments that they can provide. They only need to provide 1 treatment on each level. So maybe they add some extra windows, or they have some balconies, or I don't know, some brick on a facade, then they would comply. We've already seen a couple pre-app buildings come in the Bend Central District, and they have no problem complying with these minimum standards. Next. Next slide, please. Parking, we again tried to mirror what we just did in the Bend Central District. So for a townhome, duplex, triplex, it's 1 space per dwelling unit. And then an affordable housing project would be half a space per dwelling unit. It doesn't mean they couldn't do more, it's just these are the minimums. Next, please. Oh, and then the common open space, again, similar to what we did in the Bend Central District, if they're located within a quarter mile of a park, then they don't have to provide some common space on site. And then if not, then they have to comply with the requirements for multifamily and the residential chapter. Next, please. And these are just the dates that are tentatively scheduled. We know we have a public hearing on August 24th. I'm still waiting to hear if we're going to do a city council work session on September 16th, and then we'll start our public hearings with the council in October. That's it. I can answer any questions, and so can Brianna if you have any for this proposed amendment.
Any questions?
Yeah, no, just comments more. I appreciate it. All looks good. I would comment that with some of the regulations, I would be shocked if we saw like single family dwellings. Yeah, I don't think you can meet the density requirements, and then also with some of the design standards. So I see it as a little bit conflicting to say we're fine with anything, but then we put other rules in to that would lead that you couldn't end up doing some of those housing types. So I mean, which I'm okay with. I'm fine with it, but it's some of the regulations would prevent some of those housing types from even occurring. I would guess even some homes could be somewhat challenging, particularly with some of the transparency design standards. Have you seen townhomes that would meet that transparency for this first floor? So if you had a 2 or 3 story townhome, but how would you get that transparency for the first floor?
I would say that base camp townhomes would probably comply because they have the accessory dwelling units on the first floor, and then they have lots of transparency on the second and third floors. It's almost all glass. And even the brick ones that are across the street, I'm not sure of their name, but they would, I'd say, comply as well with the amount of windows that they have on the first floor and second.
Oh, okay. See, okay. All right. Okay. Well, those are my comments. Thank you.
Jenna, Kathy, Dave, any closing questions, comments? Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Dave.
yes, I do. Thank you. We are, as far as this whole package is concerned, we, the NLA land use subgroup, are really in favor of adding to the missing middle. And our only concern is that in the article, in the references that we are showing, in order for a micro unit to pencil out for a developer, right now the rent is about $2,300 a month. And so that is our only caution, because you only have one chance to limit its exposure before it goes citywide. And I think that's our bottom line and our proposal. So again, we will be sending out our letter with the references today or tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Last thoughts, anyone, until we go on to parking? Jenna, I see you thinking.
Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge and thank everybody who was involved in the subcommittee at supposedly about House Bill 2001, but then about the micro units and the small units. It was really invaluable feedback from all of you, and it was a lot of time that was committed to that. And I was always really impressed with with all of the ideas everyone brought forward. So just wanted to say thank you.
Great. Yes, thank you. Okay, shall we move on to parking? Sort of a non-controversial topic. So, Toby.
I saw Toby on here somewhere.
I'm here.
You see Toby?
Hey, Toby.
Hey.
Hi. Good afternoon. So I have a quick presentation that some of you might have already seen from the last council meeting, but I thought it would be good to go through that real quick. I will take a little bit more time than at the work session 2 weeks ago.
Toby,
yeah.
I'm going to stop you for a moment. There's some feedback somewhere, and I looked, I think everyone was muted. There's something on your system. Yeah, I think it's you.
Okay.
Well, not right now. Well, why don't you go ahead? When you were speaking, it seemed to get, so maybe it's just my system. Anyway, I'm going to mute myself. Why don't you continue? Thanks.
Okay, I hope this is better now. I'll put up a quick presentation similar to the one that I did at the council work session 2 weeks ago. Anybody could let me know if you see that. So that I can get it full screen, but here. Okay, so the Old Bend Neighborhood Parking Benefit District, we have started getting the information live, and over the last couple of months, I've been working with the Old Bend Neighborhood Association to dive into this and plan that. Many of you know that there are specific areas in the Old Bend neighborhood that at times, different times of the year, more frequent and less, experience a lot of different parking challenges. Most of them brought into the neighborhood from external factors like a successful downtown shopping district, an active recreational park with Drake Park and Miller's Landing, and also in normal times, not the ones that we're in right now, also special events at in downtown and also in at the parks. This often leads to crowded streets and also unsafe streets and limited parking availability for local residents. The main complaints that we have heard from the Old Bend neighborhood residents are that there's parking congestion on residential streets, nuisances and sometimes unsafe conditions on the streets, lack of parking enforcement, downtown employees parking to avoid paying monthly fees, and that means parking on their residential streets, rude behavior from parking visitors, mainly later in the day, and a big one also is RV and camper parking during the day, but also overnight in certain areas of the neighborhood. Since about the end of last year and the beginning of January, we have held a couple community input meetings to invite residents from all neighborhoods to come and share like what their parking challenges were. Out of that came a more closer, smaller group that was composed of stakeholders from businesses and residents in different neighborhoods, but then mainly crystallized into the creation of a working group that included members from the Old Bend Neighborhood Association and also including council member Chris Piper to be that liaison to Old Bend. And we started working to say started working on like what would it look like actually to have a parking district for Old Bend? How can we help solve some of these challenges and these parking situations that have been going on for years? What's important to note is that we quickly realized that addressing just one item will not fix the overall experience for residents in the neighborhood. It will just kick the ball down the street, so to speak, and like we just like pass on the buck. So we recommended the creation of a parking benefit district pilot program for the Old Bend neighborhood to really find a way to mitigate some of these parking challenges that neighbors experience there. This is also a council goal to develop a program for residential and business parking districts based on the recommendations of the citywide parking study of the past. So what's a parking benefit district? So the Old Bend Neighborhood Parking Benefit District would be a defined geographic area where a portion of generated parking revenues is returned back into the district to finance improvements and enhance the quality of life and promote neighborhood safety. So it's not as just saying, hey, let's create a permit program and create more parking revenue. It's really trying to combine this with bringing a benefit back to the neighborhood and finding an external funding source. The area included in this proposed parking district would be bound by the downtown parking district to the north, the Deschutes River to the west, the Bend Parkway to the east, and Arizona Avenue to the north. The parking district for Old Bend would prioritize parking availability for Old Bend residents. To put that in perspective, we have found about 76,000 linear feet of curb space that's available for parking within the Old Bend neighborhood. That in a very conservative trajectory or proposal that would translate down to about 3,000 parking spaces that are available on residential streets. And we would make about 2,600 priority parking for residents of the neighborhood. That would require a residential parking permit for Old Bend residents and also would make visitor permits available for them, for their guests, so if they have a family event. And we felt it important that we also keep in mind that we do have some small successful businesses in Old Bend and need to make accommodations for in-district employees. So the district would propose also in-district employee permits, but they would be limited really to the streets surrounding the business, and that would be a free-for-all for the entire neighborhood. We would have some time-restricted parking areas around the small business corridors and public parks, very similar to what we've done successfully at McKay Park, if you recall that. We would start effective parking enforcement. No rules will make sense if we can't enforce them and show people that they need to comply with them. And we're proposing that down the road in a phase 2 of this, there would be paid on-street parking and special event parking areas along event areas for example, Lake Park. And those would be hybrid areas that would allow for special event parking only during special events. This is a high-level map that shows you all very colorful, like all these different areas. We have green, which would be a full-hour recreational parking area, very similar to what we've done at McKay Park and what you see already currently at Riverside Boulevard along Drake Park. We would expand that in the south to Miller's Landing as well. You would see that blue area would be those proposed hybrid areas where it would be mainly residential area, but also during a special event parking area for attendance of events. Mainly that orangey color would be residential parking, permit only parking. The yellow would be to our business areas. You can see that that's where that connection is to downtown, and then also around Delaware and Broadway, around Jackson's Corner, and again out there to the west on Riverside Boulevard, where you have active culture as a small business. And then there's that proposed in the future time restricted and potential paid parking around Colorado and Arizona to have some more parking management strategies down there. You can see this map also live if you go to the bendoregon.gov parking district webpage. There's an interactive map where residents actually can go down to their curb space where they live and see how this proposed district would affect their stretch of road. We have a fairly quick moving timeline, and it so happened that we were working on this already in the beginning of the year. Then COVID-19 changed everything a little bit, but we decided to move through that, which was actually very good. Gave us a lot of time to engage the neighborhood association and work with them. And so as for now, we started the public outreach on August 6th. We have a webpage live where residents can find out what we're proposing. There's a map, there's a survey, a fairly straightforward survey for residents to take. We also did a mailing to every household in the neighborhood with a postcard to inform them about this proposal and about the survey, where we already get about 10% of sent out contacts we have received back in residents taking the survey. We hope to bring this back to council early September for a reading of an ordinance, and the ordinance would then come back for a second reading, giving it hopefully enough time for public input there in addition to the survey. And once that, if that is good, if the neighbors actually think they like this idea and that we have a majority favorable support of 51% in the neighborhood, we will then move to implement that and hopefully sometime in October launch this parking district. Now, do you have any questions?
Any questions, anyone? I know we got a little preview of this recently. So.
Yeah, I do, but anybody else can feel free to go ahead if they want to.
So I just had a quick question. I know a lot of residents saw postcards. What are the other lines of communication, and how do people know actually about participating in the survey?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we have, from our end, from the city, we have sent out the postcard to every household in the Old Bend neighborhood. And then the Old Bend Neighborhood Association started their own outreach effort to reach out to their neighbors. And we felt it really important that they're part of that. So they sent out an email to their listserv. They're starting to post on all social media channels that they have. And they're planning on like stepping that up a little bit more and sharing more on the next door neighborhood app and on other social media channels. From our end, from the city, we also included it in the city, in the neighborhood newsletter from our community relations manager. And we will also include it in the upcoming city newsletter as well to reach out and trying to really hit a lot of different channels to share this with residents of the district.
And how do you distinguish between a resident in any of those areas versus everybody else in our community?
Yeah, that was a little bit more difficult to do that, especially when we have so many different neighborhoods. So we put a couple filters onto the survey where we asked for a name and asked for the address that people are living at. And in the beginning, we started adding, how did you hear about the survey? And we gave the option of the postcard or the neighborhood email and then other. It was interesting. We got a couple of responses to the survey already before, when people mentioned they found it out through the postcard before the postcard was sent. So those were little filters to find hopefully out that people are in the neighborhood or not. And then we also asked the same question about the street again at the end. So just before we ask at the last question about are you in favor of a district like this or not, we asked what for them to pick a road on them who they live on, in hopes that somebody who would just ride a street, they can't go back and hopefully like know that that was really pick the right street. And it's really difficult to have the survey done like this without with finding tools to make sure that somebody is not, so to speak, like faking it, you know?
Yeah, I was curious. One last question I will have is, in some of these neighborhoods where there are parks and event sites, or the especially the event focused impact, it goes sort of beyond these particular areas of neighborhoods. I mean, so I assume that you're looking at next steps beyond sort of where we are today. So this is sort of the start of looking at maybe parking throughout our community in a larger perspective, sort of larger focus.
Yeah, so I really felt, and when I talked with David Evans about that, and John, we felt like doing a pilot is a good idea to really see how's this working. And it also gives us a good idea to actually make adjustments, to not say, look, right now I can suggest these are the best management strategies that we can do, and especially related to events. Doing instead of trying to just prohibit the parking everywhere, trying to enable it would be good. And it also enables us to now engage event holders for old event in this, doing this pilot. And if that works, to show others, look, this is what we did and this worked, and let's see how this would work for you, right? And it also, I think, would encourage us to look into more shared parking opportunities, especially during events, which didn't work so much in the past, where we can say, look, we do have some lots, like privately owned lots, especially in downtown and surrounding areas, often could be used on weekends, and nobody was interested in doing that. But now if we engage the event holders and show that this worked, hopefully we can build something there for the future that can be multiplied and copied across the city. Yes.
Thanks. Justin, Jenna? I know, Justin, you had some questions. Jenna? No, Justin, yes?
I do. I actually had somebody reach out to me that had some concerns, about this. It was somebody that lives in the Old Bend neighborhood, and then it actually owns a couple properties in the neighborhood. Some of the concerns that that I was hearing, is one on the survey. This person didn't really have any challenges in parking, and where they're located at. But particularly like on question 4, I'm looking at the survey, all the questions actually are issues. And there was no option like, no, I haven't received any, but it was forcing this person to answer that there was an issue before they could go on to the next screen. And so are we, it seems like we're potentially skewing our survey results by doing that. So I don't know if there's a fix for the survey. But some of the other concerns I was hearing is employees and customers, because there are some neighborhood commercial areas in this area, whether it's Jackson's Corner or I'm thinking, there's another, little commercial spot over on Hill Street. There's some others that are in the area. So how do employees and customers, how do they interact in those commercial areas? Same thing with vendors. So if you have a house cleaner or you have a landscaper that's coming in for a very short period of time, how do how do they not get caught up with the potential of a parking fine? And so how do we address that piece of it? Short-term rentals was another one that I heard questions about, and how are we going to interact with people that have short-term rentals, because they're clearly short-term rentals that are in this neighborhood. I think, I don't think all the rules actually require a short-term rental to have on-site parking. I think they do have the ability to have at least one off-site parking space. And so, how are we also penalizing, those property owners? 14-day visitor passes, why 14 days? If you have somebody, a kid that's home from college, that necessarily would, that they're going to be home for more than 14 days. So how do we accommodate for that? It seems like there's a lot of questions. I feel like we're in a pretty short, compressed time frame from when, for council at least, hearing this and trying to react. And that's, I'm looking at this timeline, and it's pretty condensed. And when you're talking about, I think I heard you say that there was going to be a neighborhood vote. Is that right?
Yeah, it's part of the survey.
Okay, and then how does that work? I mean, is it just based on the survey, or is there a separate vote that would be an actual, a true vote that would actually, collect information from all the property owners, not just people that responded to a survey?
Yeah. So those were a lot of questions. So
Sorry.
You want me? No, that's okay. That's great. I think that's a good opportunity to actually explain that more. So let me go through it step by step in the way that I took notes from what you just asked. So great. Employers and businesses. So the reason that we created those 2-hour time restricted business corridors around, like the small business corridors, was exactly what you said. We want to make sure that we don't say like, hey, like Delaware, where you have Jackson's Corners, it's all going to be residential and nobody can park here to go to the business. That wouldn't be right. So we said doing the model of what we have done in other areas, like having the 2-hour time restricted, would work for that very well, because we know that for service industry like food establishments, restaurants, the 2-hour turnover is usually really good and will work. So we have made accommodations for that along the areas where the district would go downtown, for Delaware Broadway, for Riverside, where you have active culture, and for Northwest Hill, where there is like one food establishment over there that has some off-street parking, but probably not enough during lunchtime. So we do have made some accommodations for that. In the in-district employee one, the parking is an interesting one too. From the feedback that I've heard, it is a concern for everybody, whether they're in favor or not in favor of the idea of parking restrictions. And the number one concern was, well, right? And so what we have done is created an in-district permit for employees of businesses that are in the open parking.
Hey, Toby.
Yep.
I think your headset may have slipped.
Yeah, it's something that was getting kind of quiet.
Something happened to your head. Yeah, it's yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, we still have a little that feedback. You may want to check after this meeting. You may want to check that too. But okay, thanks. I just couldn't hear you anymore.
Sorry.
So
can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Okay. So we have the in-district employee permit, and that will limit a little bit where in-district employees can park to like roads very close to the business. For example, if you are working at Market of Choice, we would past that the permit allow you to park on Arizona and Colorado, not on Delaware. Vendors and nannies would be something that it would be very easy to do through. We have a conversation with the open neighborhood how to define that, to either way consider that an in-district employee and give a permit to a specific address, or in transition phases that residents give their visitor pass for that nanny or for the cleaner that comes to their house. When they're on
Okay, Toby, I am really struggling. I have a suggestion, and maybe Juan can, this is.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mayor. Yeah, Toby, I wonder if, you know how you have your headset, one ear, you have it off. I wonder if that's the side that has the microphone on the headset. And maybe that's why. Just a guess. I have no idea. I'm grasping at straws.
Is this better like this?
We're getting huge feedback too. And so we've got to, so we're sorting through that, and then a sound that's wobbling. What about, what happens if you keep your video on and you call in on your phone? I mean, we're done, but I think it's a good question.
Yeah.
And we probably be good to hear the answer. It's my thought.
Yeah, Mayor, I'm happy to provide Toby with a list of questions, and I can follow up via email if we're having technical issues, and we can respond to the entire subcommittee if that works. I'm happy with that.
I'm happy with that. Yeah, sorry about that. But yes, I think that's a great suggestion if you're willing to.
Yeah, I'm happy.
It's better for all of us to hear, obviously, but I'm not, unless Toby, you have an instant solution with you. Now you're muted.
I wish I would know what's going on, but I'm like, I tried it multiple ways. I'm trying to call in right now too, real quick, but it doesn't let me do it. So,
Toby, if you click on the three dots and then click on audio connection and where it says call me, have the meeting call you on your phone, it will transition the audio to your phone, both for speaker and microphone. So you'll just need to enter your phone number in the meeting, and then press 1 when it prompts you. And now, let me unmute you. Okay, oh, no, it hasn't transitioned yet.
can you hear me now on my phone?
I think you're still coming in through the computer.
This is embarrassing.
This is our new world. It's just, there's always something. Just happened to be you today.
Yeah, it's threw me out of the icon, so sorry.
Wait, I can follow up via email.
Hey everybody, this is David. Yeah, Toby, no worries. And Mayor, Gina, appreciate the flexibility, and if the questions were able to be answered, that would be awesome, and we'll get them answered.
Great, thank you, David.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think actually now I'm on the call.
Yep.
Oh, you are.
It's a funny thing. My computer does a buzzing sound right now too, so if you hear that, I understand that that must be obnoxious.
You sound much better now, Toby.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
I kind of like the questions, the written questions, and just having us all see that. I don't know. How do you feel about that, Jenna? Can't hear you quite. I can't read your lips yet.
No, I think that's a fine idea. I mean, I think those are some important questions, and if Toby has some initial answers now, we can hear them as a group and then make sure that those get addressed, since there were several.
Yeah. So we have a little bit more time. I mean, if it's working, I mean, we might as well take this time as we had scheduled.
Okay.
So why don't can we reset and go back a little bit? Because it was really hard to hear. I couldn't follow it myself.
Toby,
Yeah.
Toby, where we kind of lost you was when you were talking about the industry employees. Or at least for me, if somebody else missed it, let us know. But you know, the Jackson Corner, the commercial areas, there was the 2-hour kind of restriction areas, and maybe the map, it would be good as you're kind of talking through some of that too, Toby. But I think where we kind of lost you was where you're talking about the industry kind of employees.
Got it. Okay, so let me bring the map back up a little bit here at least. I assume you can hear me better now. So the in-district employees, what we would have done is created an in-district employee permit that would allow the employees of these businesses to park on roads surrounding the business. So for example, if there's an employee at Market of Choice, they would be able to park in Arizona or Colorado. It was important to kind of limit that to not everywhere in the neighborhood, because that would in a little bit defeat the purpose. And so that is something that was a concern. I try to say that, like, from both sides, like from people that are a little bit questioning about the pilot, about the program, but also about them in support, to say, like, what is about that. That would be the same for businesses on Jackson, like on Delaware or on Northwest Hill. So we would give that. That is also a permit that we can very target. So meaning, to the question about, I think I answered that, but to bring that up one more time, about like vendors, service, cleaning, or nannies, that we could extend that to in-district employees like that too, and make them specific for a certain address and control it that way. That would be possible to do too. Did that answer some of those questions on the employees?
Yeah, I think so. I guess I was a little unclear on the last part in regards to, you know, if somebody has a landscaper or something, and so they would actually have to go through the process to get that particular landscaper and that vehicle permitted.
So for landscapers, that's slightly different, because we would consider them like service employees, where we would say, if it's a landscape business that goes 5 days every week, right? Every day a week, from neighborhood to, from resident to resident and property to property, we would have a service vehicle permit. That's an annual permit. They would get that, and with that they can go into the neighborhood any time of the year that they want. Where it would be a little bit different is for construction vehicles, and that was a concern that was brought up a lot, that if you have a big renovation project that goes on for a year, and now you have like multiple vehicles plus a dumpster and this and that blocking up the streets, what's with that? And I think that is something where we want to model it very similar after what we have done in downtown, that if you're a construction vehicle, you can get a daily permit, and then we can extend that too when you know you have which is $10 a day. And if you know it's a long-term project, you can get an annual permit that you can get that reduces that fee per day. So if you know, and that's something that I think once we move ahead with this, we would inform our internal departments, so that everybody, when they pull a building permit, would be made aware of like certain restrictions.
Okay.
If there's no more questions on that, I would move on to the short-term rental. I think that was the next question you had. So short-term rental was like, in pretty much every community input meeting that I've had, short-term rentals was like the second most important issue, like that. Where, I don't want to poke into the nest with Galveston, but like around the Galveston corridor, for example, that was like an issue that was really big. And the same for Old Bend, mainly because Old Bend, it has such a low owner-occupied resident rate, and there are 106 or 112 short-term rentals that are registered on the map that we can find on the city webpage. That was an issue for residents to like, what about that? Because if you have, if that's rented out, sometimes you have 2, 3, 4 different groups that are coming with a vehicle, and if they don't have enough parking on site, where do they park? And I dove into that a little bit more and found that actually out of those 112, a fairly good amount had driveways and or on off-street parking, and only 18 in Old Bend didn't. And so we felt that creating a permit that sounds harsh in the beginning when we say that the annual permit for short-term rental would be the suggested fee would be $250 a year. But if you put it in perspective, that's a little bit more than, it's almost $21 a month. That is still less than somebody would pay for a parking permit in downtown that works there every day and supports businesses there. And it's also for a for-profit business that does a good amount of revenue with overnight rentals. So that's how we came to that and concluded that and figured that there wouldn't be that many that we would issue of that anyways. There would be no dedicated space. We would treat them the same way that we would treat a resident. It's like, yeah, you get a permit, and the owner of the short-term rental would have to log into the system, put the plate number in to make sure that people know who is parking, but there wouldn't be a dedicated space, because in that moment we would do that, we wouldn't prioritize the resident anymore, right? We would treat them higher than that. So that was the reasoning behind that.
Okay, yeah, no, I understand, you know, not having the dedicated space. I just look at the logistics of, you know, having that, you know, inputting that every time, and then what if they ended up bringing a different vehicle, or, and I don't, is there an actual physical permit that somebody would have? So if there was, you know, they had to put it in their window or something, would they actually, because I could see a guest driving off with it as well. You know, and then how do you replace that and do all that? So
the idea would be that everything would be virtual, so that the system that we would have would be a complete virtual permitting system, and entering for like a short-term rental or an Airbnb that already does like a lot of input in the system. I think that would be fairly easy to like change a license plate. We would offer also, and that mainly was from our idea targeted towards like more older residents, to say like that might not be so interested in doing like a fancy online system, you know, to have like a dashboard visitor pass, which would be their regular one that they could give out. That's something we can easily entertain too. And I think that's what I think is really important to see too, that while we're doing it as a pilot and really want to actively see how can this pilot inform us and educate us how we can do this in the future in other neighborhoods, we need to learn from that, right? We need to be willing to say, look, this is the beginning. Some things might work really well. And if some things don't work well, we will adjust them, and we should, because we should be willing to do that.
yeah, no, I think that's a good point. And really to, you know, in the effort of a pilot, and because this is going to be something new, I personally would ask that we not be real heavy-handed on the enforcement side, and have a lot of grace as far as warnings and trying to gain compliance versus, you know, just, you know, flipping the switch one day and saying, hey, we have a parking, you know, district, and here's a bunch of fines that were going to come down. So I think we did that a little bit in the past when we've had some changes in downtown parking, is there was a bit of a grace period. And, you know, I would ask that, I think there's ways to collect our data that we need to be able to design the program really well. And so without having to be real heavy-handed on the fines and the enforcement side of it.
Yeah, no, and there I completely agree with you. I think there would be a period of like warnings and grace, and then some, like we have some clever designed like postcards already that we would give to residents that are not like coming across like, oh, it's still a ticket. No, we wouldn't maybe do a ticket or warning. We might just do a flyer that says, hey, you know, did you know that this is a district now, and this is what you need to do? And the beauty is with the, related to that, with a switch to the parking management system that I presented 2 weeks ago, we can get that data. That system will enable us to actually collect the data that we need to make the right judgments and informed decisions, which we would not be able to do otherwise currently, which is good.
Good. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions about that, or would you like me to ask Councilor Livingston's next question about the visitor passes or the survey?
I'd say keep moving. You got a little more time here.
Okay, good. Thanks. So the 14-day visitor pass was that we said, or we thought, it's very best practice to have one guest parking pass for everybody who has a permit, right? So for one dwelling, so that if you have somebody coming over real quick to visit, they have something to put either way on your dashboard or into the system. And then often people get a guest. You know, some family member comes over for a couple of days, and we want to make sure that we don't penalize them with like a violation once we don't do warnings anymore. And so that's where that 14-day visitor pass came from. That's also that would be best practice to do that. That's very common in other residential parking programs that it's handled that way. And then there's always the flexibility to say, like to your point of like, hey, my son, daughter, or child is like going to college, is coming home over the summer. Now that he's gonna be here for like 3 months or for 2 months over the summer, how do we handle that? I think we can have a lot of flexibility in how we're adjusting that and extending temporary visitor passes to somebody like that without making it too overly complicated. On the notion of the survey, it is a neighborhood vote, and the discussion with Old Bend was that, and I think I mentioned that for something different before, like because the Old Bend neighborhood has such a low owner-occupied residency, we felt we don't really get a good feel on residents if we only send a survey or vote to owners of the properties, but also to tenants and people that actually live there, because they often have to experience the parking challenges every day. That said, that's why we created the mailing from the city, to really make sure that we have done what we need to reach every household in the neighborhood, and now follow that up with more communication. As it relates to the survey, you're correct. We are stating the challenges that were observed, because those were the challenges, parking challenges that were mentioned over years from residents of the neighborhood. But it's not a simple yes or no question. It's not just saying, yeah, we experience this or we don't experience. It's a rating scale to give people the option that if it's 1 to 5, right? 5, yeah, we experience this every day. 1, hardly ever. So to give people the option, if we can refine that, we can adjust that very easily. But I think then if we would do that, we would have to go back to the 120 people that already did the survey to give them an opportunity to answer it separately. But I think we get a good picture from that. And if you, I can gladly share the current results already with you on that, like where we at with that. And the majority of people do say that they experience some of these issues. And it also helps us really getting a scale. Let's say for example, is this 3.2, right? It gives us to scale how important is this. And the tricky thing about the Old Bend neighborhood is, you're correct. There's some residents that live on Congress or State that have alley access, that have driveways for them. They don't experience the challenges that somebody experiences who lives on Chamberlain or Sizemore or Delaware. And that's a real reality. And so I can completely understand if somebody says, well, what I don't really see that. Why do you make me have a permit? But a comment back for me would be an engaging conversation would be also to say, well, then you also wouldn't need a permit because you can park. You don't have no reason to park on the street. You can park on your driveway and in your alley. And that would be a good alternative too.
All right, thank you, Toby.
Okay, does anybody have any further questions? And I gladly make myself available for more questions via email too. So.
Yeah, all good questions, good conversation. I'm glad it's a pilot program myself. I think we'll probably learn and want to do some fine tuning. And I think that's setting up the system with that sort of expectation that we can make tweaks to it is really important as we go forward with the community.
Yeah.
So sounds like
Mayor, this is David. Councilors and Mayor, Toby, I think it'd be good maybe just to clarify here real quick as we are winding down on time, but as Councilor Livingston mentioned, it is an aggressive schedule. We were hoping to have this pilot going earlier, but COVID delays and stuff. If the survey comes back at the end of the month and is not favorable, then I think we regroup. if we feel like, based on the feedback we've gotten, that it will have a majority of support. But if not, we'll probably be having that conversation with council as an update as well, like on the 2nd, when we had a placeholder in there for a first reading. Toby, on the survey, was there a requirement on that, just to clarify for everybody, that a certain amount of responses, you know what I mean, 2/3 or whatever of the survey was responded to touch base on Councillor Livingston's, a comment, which could happen if somebody just, throws it in the corner of the kitchen counter and doesn't respond? Is there a minimum threshold there?
Yeah, so the goal is that we get 50% of responses from the official postcard that we send out. So we send out 1,005 postcards. So we hope to get a minimum of 500 or 503 responses back. Out of those responses, 51% should have to be in favor for us to move forward. And as much as I think this is a good idea, if the residents don't want it, then we have to go back to the drawing board and come up with smaller solutions or think about what we can do to help the areas that need it. And to give you a little bit of feedback, I've gotten, not a lot, but I got about like 10, 12 emails over the weekend. I think some I shared with you all too. And I got both sides. I got people that say this is not a good idea. We don't need this. Just do parking enforcement. And my comment to that is like, what are we enforcing? Right? Because how do we tell somebody you can park there if there's no rule that says you can't park there? But all the way to, thank you so much for doing this. This has been so many years, and we're really looking forward to supporting that. I might not like everything, but what can I do to help you spread the word? So I think we get both sides, which is what we want, because we want it to be a conversation. And I think that that's difficult enough to do in today's environment, to engage people in the conversation, show them why we want to do that. But also saying, like, it's not just us coming up with a program that we want to do. This is in response to something that has been asked for years. And hopefully we can do that. That would be great. So.
Thanks, Toby.
Okay, we're winding down on time. I'm going to turn this back to John Skidmore for a moment. John, is there anything else?
No, I think we covered some good ground, and I appreciate the detail that we were able to discuss with the parking district, and some good questions. And Toby, thanks for making the adjustment with your with your phone. That was helpful.
That worked.
Yeah,
Thank
sorry
you.
about that.
Also appreciate the input from the various commissions that commented on the housing code amendment. So I thought that was good as well. But what we will do is we will have another one of these in 2 months' time. Myself and Susanna Jolver, who might be on here, she was having some internet problems. We'll put together, I think, a bit more of a detailed agenda. And I think with some of the stuff, it might be better to have the public input during the conversations relating to specific topics versus having public comment up front. So maybe we need to just figure out how to dissect those two so that folks that are interested in a specific topic can comment when it's timely. With that said, there's nothing else on this agenda. I will work with Susanna and Sally to get topics for the next meeting in a couple months. And with that, I think we can call it.
Oops, hold on.
Hey, John,
Yeah.
Since we were having problems with the public comment line, is there anybody that ended up calling in on a correct line that wanted to speak?
I don't see anybody new, but we do have somebody who was here already, and we're gonna allow this person to speak. So I'm gonna go ahead and unmute. If it's okay with council, I'll proceed.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren.
Go ahead.
Hi, this is Dave Johnson again. I wanted to compliment Gina on her suggestion about doing these micro units in the around the hospital. since that is an overlay zone, that might get us out of any fair housing kinds of problems. And I really appreciate that input. We will look into that. Thank you very much.
Did we have an additional caller?
We do have one additional caller, Mayor Russell. 206-419. I've already unmuted your microphone. You should have heard the 2 beeps. Please proceed. You raised your hand to let us know you wanted to speak.
Thank you. This is Lisa Mushel once again. I am now speaking more as a private citizen. I would like to point out the unintended consequences, the potential of these micro units. And I just want to really encourage counselors and everybody involved to do a bit more research. This has been a very interesting topic over the last couple of weeks for the NLA and for me personally. And I happened to stumble on a pretty incredible book called The Color of Law. And in that book, it talks about some of our nation's historical situations with affordable housing or developments that were aimed at creating affordable housing that actually had the opposite effect. I am very concerned that these micro units could lead us in that direction. And in today's current climate with some of our racial tensions, I would hate for us to go down this path of inadvertently creating a situation where we are discriminating against some of our residents in Bend. I am absolutely all for creating some affordable housing solutions. I just don't know if we're on the right path here. If you look at this from a real estate perspective, housing is typically valued on a price per square foot basis. And that follows that we're going to have micro units that are on a much, much smaller square footage basis. And when you compare the amenities of these units versus other studio or one bedroom places, I think that we are going to have a very slippery slope that automatically will cause some of our other rental properties to increase in price. So I behoove everyone, please do some research, please educate yourselves and look at what's happening in other cities. This may not be the answer for Bend. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. And I know this is going next in front of the Planning Commission, and so I encourage you to bring that information and your comments to the Planning Commission well ahead of time so they have a chance to think about it and absorb it and maybe read your information as well. And so, yeah, takes a lot of different people to make a good pie for our community. Okay. So with that, I think we're done.
It's 5 o'clock.
5 o'clock. Well done. All right. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Thanks for your good work.